Alright guys, Last Epoch versus Diablo 4. Which game is better? Is a very frequently asked question that I still consistently get while I'm streaming either game. And the reason why is people may want to decide on which game they may want to purchase. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some sort of more objective things that are kind of seen in the action RPG community between these two games. But I also want to mention that later this year, Diablo 4 will be going free on Game Pass. So if your decision is based off of, well, I'm kind of, tight on money, I can only purchase one of these, well, first off, Last Epoch is only available on PC. I don't know when the console release is going to be coming out for the game, but I'm sure that's something that they want to do in the future. However, with Diablo, since it will be free on Game Pass eventually later this year, well, I would suggest if you are itching to play an action RPG, Last Epoch would be good to purchase now, and then you could play Diablo potentially later for free. However, I do, at the end of the day, both enjoy these games throughout most of their life cycle, and with Diablo and Last Epoch, we're going to be getting some updates. So starting right off, I want to go ahead and put some text on the screen. Now you guys can see some gameplay of the endgame on both of the games side by side. You guys can kind of see how they play. Last Epoch is going to be on the left, where it has like the HP on the bottom left, and you can see where it says 1988 versus the right side, which is going to be Diablo 4 with the newer Gauntlet mode that got added. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with this over here, which kind of highlights some stuff that I would say is arguably objectively seen in the community. So these are the main reasons why I would pick up Last Epoch if I had to decide between one or the other. Last Epoch is more a true action RPG experience, as in you really have to read certain things and tinker around, and you can absolutely make some really bad builds in the game. Which isn't necessarily bad, but sometimes people like to play off meta and weird things and have a lot more crazy build ideas, theory crafting. Last Epoch will allow you to put in 1,000+ hours, and you will still find newer builds in the game because this works with this unique item, this set item. There's so many of these crazier things, and I'll kind of explain that in a moment. Last Epoch has actually one of the best trades in any action RPG. And the reason why I want to say this is I play Path of Exile as well, and in the future we'll make a Path of Exile versus a Last Epoch video, but I want to mainly focus this on comparisons versus Diablo. Diablo, if you want to trade, it's a nightmare. You have to go onto Discords, different forums, different posts, different websites, and sometimes people just simply don't respond. It's kind of like the Path of Exile trading experience. People just simply don't respond. You have people that are scamming. It's very annoying to have to deal with this kind of thing. And the in-game auction house is a great system because you can't actually flip items. Originally, I thought this was a terrible idea, but after playing, I actually think it's the better solution because that way you can still find deals, and it kind of makes it so people need to be able to trade for what they want versus trying to buy an item and flipping it, because once the item is traded once, that's it. It also has one of the best crafting systems for any action RPG as far as like the learning curve to actually make some of the best items in the game, and it's quite fun. And you never really brick your item, you kind of just get to a point where, well, you might not get the highest tier on some of the rolls. And I think that overall, the crafting system in Last Epoch is probably seen as one of the best crafting systems in any action RPG. Whereas Diablo, the crafting system as well, you have one roll that you can re-roll to something else and it's random. Like it's basically Diablo 3's. The build diversity in this game is so much better because a lot of times, unless you're copying someone's build, it's not going to be exactly the same because there's so many other things that can go into your build. There's different, exalted rolls and stuff. It is a lot different. Another thing that I really like with Last Epoch is it values your time. Specifically, if you've played Diablo, the uber unique endgame farming experience is absolutely terrible. It is being addressed, and they have been moving steps into a direction where it becomes easier, but the game actually values your time. As in, if you are interested in doing the trade league, well, you can keep on playing the game, you're going to get gold, and eventually, hopefully, you can get the item that you want to just purchase, right? Whereas Diablo, you can keep on playing for thousands and thousands of Duriel runs and still not receive the item that you get. At the end of the day, when Duriel drops the item, it might not be the uber unique that you want. And it's a very feels bad experience if you get on the game, and I've experienced this myself as someone who has actually farmed uber uniques for tons and tons of hours. Well, you could play for 10 hours and still not get the item. With Last Epoch, you're always building towards something because you're essentially farming your currency to eventually just get it. And on top of that, you can get your other items and trade them, whereas Diablo, trading the items for gold isn't really that useful because you cannot just get the Uber Uniques. You can go on, third-party websites and use your real money and buy Duriel mats, which is terrible in terms of experience, because on top of risking your account being banned, well, you still might not get the item that you want. So you can't really like trade for your items. Trading in Diablo 4 right now is, I would say, a lot lackluster, but it's specifically valuing the time that you put into the game. If you want to get those unique stones, Evernight and Genesis, these are like really rare stones that exist in the game, you could farm again for 10 plus hours and not get it, and you just basically wasted your time, because through that process you didn't really gain anything. You don't get any other bonus Paragon points like in Diablo 3. So it values your time a lot more, I would say, than Diablo 4, because again, you could trade your items. But what about the reasons to pick Diablo 4? If you like a campaign, you like the story, Blizzard pretty much has some of the best cinematics. Like, I mean, that's like pretty much objectively there. Last Epoch's campaign, well, it does exist, and if you want to listen to the story, some people did like the story. I was reading up on the forums. I honestly was just interested in seeing like the gameplay part of the game. It didn't really offer anything new to action RPG genre. It's just basically follow the arrow, and you kind of just progress, and you go straight through the entirety of the campaign. You just pretty much go here, kill this, go here, pick up this item, turn it in, keep on going. That's pretty much the experience of Last Epoch. I think the story, the campaign for Diablo 4 was relatively put together, and it's a lot better of an experience. Now, when I was saying before, where Last Epoch has a lot more build diversity, you can spend 1,000 plus hours, this could be seen as a plus or minus. If you've never played an action RPG before, Diablo 4 is still a much better game in terms of its simplicity, as in there's not too much to overwhelm some newer players to the genre with. I'd actually suggest Diablo 3, which is something I'll get into in a moment. But I really think that Diablo 4 is much simpler, and it's designed that way to get people that haven't played action RPGs to maybe try out the game. But the combat in Diablo 4 100% feels way better than Last Epoch. Pretty much at some point in any action RPG, you get to the point where, unless it's some sort of pinnacle boss, you're just going to be one-shotting things and moving on. But the action, visceral combat that Diablo delivers is just superior to Last Epoch. Last Epoch obviously doesn't have a big budget compared to Diablo 4, but the game still has a lot of cool creative, elements to it, but in terms of the way that the combat actually feels, is not nearly on par with it. So those are the main things. Now, I want to go into the nitty-gritty here. So what makes Last Epoch so dang cool, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you guys can actually see it here, is let's take the skill, for example, Javelin. So I would throw a Javelin, it activates it, just, you throw a projectile out, right? Now you can change, this is still the same skill over here, Siege Barrage, where you throw the Javelin into the air, then they kind of rain down on the enemy. You can see this, Smiting Battle Standard, where you get to plant and it strengthens your allies smiting enemies in an area, or you can have it like Ricochet. So even though this is the same skill over here where you see the different ways that it interacts, you can't really do that with Diablo. The skill pretty much stays the same, with the exception of a few alterations, which I'll show you guys in a moment here. But you could take a skill like Static Orb. This is, again, Last Epoch here. It just shoots out. You can maybe have it bounce, and you can convert it to a different sort of damage. And this is where this game, it becomes a lot different. So I'm going to make this big here so you guys can actually see it. And this is a skill called Fireball. So it starts off on the Mage class, and we'll talk about classes in a second. But basically, this is Fireball. You shoot it, it does fire damage, right? If we were to look at the same skill in Diablo, Fireball, you throw it, it does some damage. And there's an enchantment that you can get with it. But for the most part, just look at it, it does damage, and it has like Lucky Hit, whatever. And the upgrades for it, this is the skill tree here. So you can get this next upgrade here, and this one you have to get. And then you get to basically decide out of these two, which one do you want. So you put 1 point into it to activate the skill, then you put more points to just get more damage. And the next skill over here makes it so it's going to increase the radius based on the distance. And then you only have one of these options, so you can deal 10% of the burning damage we've applied to the enemy as direct damage. So what this could open up the doors for, if you want to add dot damage, then the Fireball can kind of consume a portion of that. Or you can make it so the explosion's crit strike damage is increased by 20% or increased by 30% when it hits at least 3 enemies. With Last Epoch, if we look at the Fireball, this is a whole brand new skill tree right here. We do have things where it's going to increase your damage, your range, you can get extra projectiles, and this would be a little bit more in the realm of modifying, get even more projectiles, even more crit over here. But this is where Last Epoch gets a lot more interesting. We could take the Fireball skill, maybe put points in here so we can actually pierce, so we can get, more AoE to clear out more things faster. And we could maybe make it so it has more crit. And then we could take it further and convert it to a plasma ball. So it has kind of like the same identity as Fireball, but now it's a plasma ball. And on top of that, we get extra crit damage, and we have now converted it to lightning damage. So now it has a lightning tag. So if I have +2 lightning skills, or your lightning skills have a chance to do X condition, well, now this Fireball can have that change over here. And so you can see where this game gets a little bit more interesting. Now, it goes even further with some of the points that you can put into to completely modify the skill. This one's increasing the cast speed, nothing too big here. Now, this one has increased cast speed and deals more damage for each extra projectile. So instead of having like, a bunch of extra projectiles shoot out, you would now shoot out one giant fireball. So again, it changes things up a little bit. Now we're getting into something much cooler. You can see now we've converted the fireball into a flamethrower. So there's a lot more of these that can kind of activate other skills and or change the skill completely. Which is kind of cool. So this now becomes a channeled ability, similar to like Incinerate or like Inferno if you played at Diablo 2. So it basically changes up the skill, which I think is a really cool thing with the game. And this is what, again, makes Last Epoch so much different. Now, looking at the classes over here, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so you guys can see kind of the gameplay as I kind of just rant about the other classes in terms of what you can do. So kind of how it works with Last Epoch is you have 5 of your starter classes. Just like in Diablo, you have your 5 starter classes, but they don't really evolve into anything different. If I play a barbarian, you can play a barbarian too, and you can just swap your build at any time to become, well, the same barbarian that I'm playing, right? But with Last Epoch, there's a lot more build diversity because even if you're a mage, you can go into a sorcerer, spellblade, rune master. If I'm playing a rogue, I could go into a falconer, which has a falcon pet. If I want to be a marksman, again, a ranged character, I can do that. If I want to be a rogue that dual wields blades, I can go into blade dancer. It has a lot more build diversity in terms of, oh, well, I'm not just a rogue. So instead of it having 5 classes here, because it shows off 5, each one of these other secondary or ascendancy classes basically act as a whole new class because, well, you can only go so far in one of the passive skill trees from one of the ones that you select. They also get skills specifically that are only available at a certain threshold for that class. So you can almost think of it like you're multiplying those 5 times 3, so you have 15 classes in the game. So that's where I would say Last Epoch excels at being able to add a little bit more to the game. And I think that that is a very, very big point to the game. Whereas Diablo, again, if I'm playing a barbarian, well, I can spin to win, or I can maybe use a hammer, but at the end of the day, my barbarian could be basically the same as someone else's barbarian if they want to just make a small little minor tweak. Obviously, there's the Paragon board, but as far as like the build diversity, Last Epoch absolutely dunks on Diablo in that department. But that's not too much of a bad thing. Now, the other thing with Last Epoch that adds a lot more depth to the game is specifically once you reach the end game, you can actually get items. This is a item over here that is a unique that is converted to a legendary. But what it does is it gives you access to a skill that would not actually be on your like skill tree that you normally couldn't get. So what this does is you would actually build a like attack damage or a high crit chance attack damage build, but you would add a new skill to it. So we're looking at specifically the very final line where it says chance to cast Dragonfire on crit. So you have a chance on a crit, so ideally you try to get 100% crit, and you don't even need to go for bow damage anymore. You can actually spec into spell damage. So it has a chance to cast a Dragonfire, which is a completely different ability. So this is what Dragonfire does. So it bursts enemies with a fire breath and does some sort of damage in a cone, and the added spell damage applies at 900% effectiveness. Normally you'd get some sort of attack damage, bow damage, whatever, when you're playing a, ranged build, a marksman, so to speak, right? But now I have a brand new ability where I can start scaling spell damage because I'm going to build into some sort of unique. This is what Last Epoch does that I think is just so much better in many, many ways because you're able to kind of make a brand new build that doesn't even exist in the, base passive or the base skill tree for the classes. Again, the thing that's so cool with Last Epoch in its design is you can select any of these skills, and each skill here has its own skill tree, which again makes this game so dang cool. Like each one of these is the same skill, but it's just doing something completely different, and you can make a build around that. And I want to say that's pretty much the biggest draw to Last Epoch is just the creativity that can exist in the game. But if you have not played an action RPG, and a lot of people ask, what is the best action RPG to start out with? And I've mentioned several times before, if you don't have money, well, both of these games, at least at the moment, Diablo 4, still cost money until it becomes free later this year on Game Pass. I would suggest, well, if you want to play something for free, the best recommendation, 100%, is Last Epoch. Although that game is quite difficult, there is a very steep learning curve. I do have video guides, which will also link down below, and Path of Exile is 100% free. Your other options for action RPG as far as in the free market, well, there is also Torchlight Infinite, there's on top of that Diablo Immortal, but I would really suggest, if you've never played one of these games before, an action RPG, and you want to get into it, my biggest recommendation is actually going to be Diablo 3. And the reason why is, one, it always goes on sale. A lot of times it'll go on, it's 20 bucks right now, but you usually want to get the one that comes with the expansion. But the reason why I always suggest Diablo 3 is because you're able to kind of gain a huge amount of power, and you actually get to feel incredibly godly. And that's one thing that some action RPGs like Path of Exile take a very, very long time to actually get to the point to get certain items to become very, very powerful. And Diablo 3 has the fantasy of, well, you start off and there's a great campaign that you can go through. It's all narrated. It's very easy to kind of know where to go. Whereas games like Path of Exile, while they are free, it's not very beginner friendly at all. That's why I would recommend you guys to check out Diablo 3 if you've never played an action RPG before. But to go ahead and kind of sum up what I wanted to go ahead and suggest and give you my overall thoughts on it. If you've played action RPGs before and you understand the game and you like tinkering with your character, no doubt Last Epoch is your pick. But if you've never played a game before and you just want a brand new action RPG, because Diablo 3 is a little bit older, the graphics aren't up to par with, of course, Diablo 4, because it came out in 2012, well, if you want a storyline, a campaign, and maybe you already have friends that are playing Diablo 4, that would be great to go ahead and hop in, you can play with your friends, and I think that's great. Last Epoch, you can still play with your friends. There's a lot more things to do as far as playing by yourself, being able to kind of tinker around and just do a lot more crazier things in the game. I think Last Epoch is definitely for you. So that's going to kind of answer the question, hopefully, of which game is better. And at the end of the day, it's kind of what's better for you. So again, if you like to tinker around, Last Epoch's your game. If you just want something that has a campaign, you can go through. Maybe if you only want to spend, like, let's say 20 hours into a game, no doubt Diablo 4. Because sometimes people just want to go ahead and play the campaign and then they're done with the game. That's totally cool. I would highly suggest Diablo 4 if that's what you want to do. But if you want to spend hundreds or thousands of hours in a game, Last Epoch, in my personal opinion, has a lot more variety in content and what you can actually do in the game if you're willing to put in the time. But if you're not willing to put in the time, heck, I have full guides that will get you that super OP build, because Last Epoch, if you're not playing like a super OP build, you might not be able to do very high corruption, but most builds should be able to make it towards the end game. While in Diablo 4, certain things like minions, well, before we get that Season 4 update, minions just kind of feel a little bit lackluster at the moment. So Last Epoch, if you're willing to put in the time, you can pretty much build whatever you want to. Will it be the best of the best? Probably not, because there are certain classes that are much better than other ones. But that wraps it up. That's my thoughts on it. You guys can let me know yours down below. And if you have any questions, let me know. I'll try to answer it maybe in a future video. But we'll also cover Path of Exile versus Last Epoch very soon. But if you want to see more action RPGs, because there's actually 2 big RPGs coming out this year that I'm excited to cover, subscribe and you'll see it very soon. But take care and let me know your thoughts. Which one do you personally like better, Last Epoch or D4? Take care. I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.